Wrap it up, man. Wrap it up. The league title is over. Said it a few weeks ago. There were a few Arsenal fans in my comments saying, this is so disrespectful. I can't believe you're a casual. You're counting us out already. You're discounting us, rather. Wrap it up, man. It's over. This league title is Liverpool's. It's Liverpool's to lose, and they will not lose it from this position. And honestly, you can't say they don't deserve it. They are by far and away the best team in the league. But this is not a conversation about Liverpool. It's a conversation about Arsenal, who have drawn for the 7th time this season. It's another game where ahead they have dropped points. Now, today, there's one talking point that I'm sure is going to dominate the conversation, dominate the narrative. I'm sure the next few days, it's going to be another conversation surrounding VAR, surrounding PGMOL, and you know what, rightfully so, because it's a very odd decision. It's a unique one, honestly. In fact, I've never seen a penalty really given for the one Brighton were awarded today. A clash of heads that at first glance I thought was definitely a penalty, right? When I first saw it and then I first saw the highlight immediately after, I was like, yeah, that's a penalty. Joao Pedro has headed it. Saliba has misread the flight of the ball, or maybe he's just got there late and Pedro has headed it first, and then Saliba heads him instead of the ball. It's like a late tackle, right? It's not intentional. He wanted to head the ball, but he got there late. But then you see the replay, and he actually gets a bit of the ball. And then I think if that's an actual tackle in the box, and you get some of the ball, but then also collide into the man, would that be given a penalty? It's a very unique one. I'm seeing a lot of people saying, oh, it's definitely a penalty or it's definitely not a penalty. I don't really think it's clear cut. This is for me a really, really bizarre one. And I know this is going to be the main conversation surrounding this game, especially from Arsenal fans. But genuinely, right? I don't want to say forget that decision because it had such a big part in the game. But you guys just aren't good enough to win the league this year, man. Honestly, decision or not, even if you had won the game today, you guys don't have it this year, man. Honestly, you can't win a league title playing games like that. Brighton, for whatever reason, they got a draw today. And some might say dubiously in terms of the way they got it. But they deserve to get a point out of this game. They were just as good, if not better than Arsenal. And Arsenal, right? I feel for them in regards to the Saka injury. And obviously Odegaard, I think, was ill and came in this game. His impact wasn't huge, but we know the circumstances. And I understand those two are really their best players. But all throughout this season, there has been a huge issue of this Arsenal team in terms of creating great chances in open play. And today is no different. Now, I want to give a massive shout out to Ethan Nwaneri, who was incredible against Brentford. I thought he had an amazing cameo. And I have to give a shout out to Faisal, my friend Faisal, who, when Saka went down, he suggested that maybe Nwaneri playing off the right would be the solution for Arsenal. And I kind of laughed at that, saying, Nwaneri, like he's more of a midfielder, a central player, no? But give him credit because he's come into this Arsenal team and he's shown how much of an impact if you start putting some high technical level players in this attack, some game changers in this attack, even at the age of 17, this is the impact that they can make. I think he's been their best attacker over the last 2 games. I think he's been their most impressive non-defender in the last 2 games. Nwaneri is magic. Nwaneri is a maverick. Nwaneri can make things happen. And it's something I've been consistently calling out on Arsenal. They don't have enough players like that. And ultimately, that's why they're not going to win the league this year. Yeah, they're the best defensive team in the league. I truly think so. And it's going to keep them in games throughout this season. And they're incredibly difficult to beat. But ultimately, that front line and that midfield and that lack of open play chance creation, you can't win a league when it's at this level. It's impossible. Maybe not impossible, but when your competition is this Liverpool team, no, that is impossible. You're not beating Liverpool playing the way you are this season. And ultimately, like I said, I think it's a shame that the result was decided in that manner because it is a dubious one. It's very difficult to say that's a straightforward penalty. And to be honest with you, I think it's so dubious. I don't think Anthony Taylor should have given it. But aside from that, and I know it's a big aside because it caused the goal, Arsenal fans, you can't feel that hard done by. That's a poor performance. That's not a great performance whatsoever. And yeah, you could argue at this point in the season, performance hype. It's about getting results, right? You just need to kind of stay alive in the title race. But man, you can't run that excuse for 90% of the season. You can't. And I think Brighton today can come out of that game, no matter how they got their equalizer, content that, yeah, we were on a level playing field at worst with Arsenal today. They were. Now, what does this mean for the title race? Ultimately, I think for Arsenal, that's it. And it's actually a shame. Because I would have loved to see Arsenal win this league. Like I said, as a United fan, I'm no fan of Liverpool equaling our title record. It's gut-wrenching for me. I would have loved Arsenal to win this league. Like, what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's how I see Arsenal. That's how I saw Chelsea earlier in the season. For me, it's a damn shame that this is going to be one of the least competitive title runs that we've seen. And that's no discredit to Liverpool. They're an incredible team. But the fact that, let's be real, they're going to walk to this league title. It is a bit of a shame, both in terms of competitive standpoint and from a Man United standpoint. I would have loved someone taking it off them. But like I said, I don't think, if I really look at it objectively, Liverpool deserve it. They're by far the best team. And I think Arsenal will look at a few performances this year, a few results this year. This is definitely one of them. And yes, there have been times this year where I think they have been shagged by the referee. I do think so. But yeah, a goal has gone against them. That is a bit unfortunate. But if we look aside from that, did you do enough to win the game? I'm a little hesitant, to be honest with you. And maybe some Arsenal fans are going to watch this reaction and say, like, really, Lyes? Like, this is what you're taking away from the game? Like, how can you downplay that? I'm not trying to downplay it, but it's just another game I come out of watching Arsenal and think to myself, yeah, that's uninspiring, man. That doesn't scream at league champions for me. That doesn't scream a title credentials from that performance. It doesn't. And so for that reason, yeah, this one game is going to sting Arsenal fans because of the decision. But when you see so many performances like this, I don't care what anybody tells me, there have been so many performances like tonight from Arsenal this year. Sometimes they go their way, sometimes they don't. But the performance, I think we've seen this performance from Arsenal quite a few times. And ultimately, when you see it so many times throughout the season, I find it very difficult, if I were an Arsenal fan, to be like really mad at what I'm watching in terms of, oh, we got robbed. Like, at the end of the year, you're not going to win the league. You're going to be very comfortably in the top four. I reckon you finish second. But winning the league, your performances don't merit winning the league this season. Your transfer window didn't merit winning the league this season. Let's see what happens in January. But I think it'd be too little too late. And yeah, the decisions here and there throughout the season, the injuries are a really big thing. But ultimately, this is not a side capable of winning it. Not this year. But I don't want to make it all negative for Arsenal fans, because Nwaneri, for me, is a massive, massive positive. And this is a kid that, look, Arsenal got one of him. This is a star in the making, Ethan Nwaneri. And I'm so happy that he's taken his opportunity in Saka's absence to kind of announce himself as like, yeah, I'm ready to contribute right now. Because when Odegaard was out during that phase earlier in the season, I was somebody calling out, Mikel, give him more opportunities. He was kind of giving him the last 10 minutes here and there. And maybe Mikel Arteta would argue that at that point in the season, that's what he needed. Like, he wasn't ready to kind of contribute in a big way. But I also look at the flip side. Look at him now. In a position that you probably wouldn't consider his strongest position. He's taken it like a duck to water. He looks so comfortable. He was giving Estupiñán real problems, especially in that first half. And I want to give a shout out to Cam, because Cam made a really, really good video on Nwaneri in midweek. I retweeted it, but go check out Culture Cam's YouTube channel. Recently, he just posted a video on Nwaneri, and I thought it was a really, really good video. It talked about his talent level. Me and Cam went and watched Nwaneri a few times for, what was it, the Arsenal, either under 18s or under 21s. I watched them against Man City, and I watched them against West Ham in the final as well, too. And Nwaneri, right, like at that point, he had already made his Premier League debut. And he was actually playing up front. Not his natural position either, but you could just tell every time he gets on the ball, there's a bit of class about him. There is. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he has shown such comfort every time he's kind of been asked to play in the Prem. It doesn't seem like the occasion or the standard really phases him. He's very level-headed, very mature, and very, very talented. So I would highly recommend watching Cam's video on Nwaneri, because he's a big fan of youth football in general, and he's been harping on Nwaneri for a very, very long time. But again, in my opinion, watching Nwaneri and the impact he's already had in such a short amount of time on this Arsenal attack is all the more reason why in the transfer window, Arsenal need to raise the technical level of this attack. They have to. And I read a graphic this week on Twitter basically depicting Arsenal's squad growth and how much each area of the squad has been invested in since Arteta came in. And I think altogether it's 700 mil, right? But the majority of that 700 mil comes in the form of the defense and comes in the form of the midfield. In that, you have the likes of Partey, Rice, Merino, Odegaard, obviously Ben White, Gabriel, Zinchenko, Tomiyasu, Calafiori, Raya, obviously, and Ramsdale. But in attack, there's been Trossard, who wasn't that expensive, Jesus, who to be fair was a big money acquisition, and Kai Havertz. Outside of that, Martinelli from the academy, Saka from the academy, or Martinelli they got him from young before Arteta, I believe. Saka, and I think that's it. So they really haven't invested that much in the attack. And it shows. Let's be real, it shows. When you look at the open play chance creation, whether it's like chances, whether it's XG, whether it's open play XG, whether it's chances created, whether you look at every metric in terms of, every underlying metric in terms of open play chances created by Arsenal, it's a league average. It's not elite. It's not even great. And that's not a shock to me. They have a lot of pieces in there in terms of the Trossards, the Martinellis, who have proven in the past few years they can finish off chances. But they're not players that you can really entrust with the ball at their feet to unlock defenses on their own, to create for others. Saka is obviously a top player. He is very, very good. In my opinion, he's carried Arsenal in terms of open play chance creation. And Odegaard is really, for me, the link between everything. But outside of those two, I struggle to see that player for Arsenal. And I feel like I make this point every video, but it just becomes more and more apparent. And then when a player like Nwaneri, who is really a high technical level player, comes in and even more so exposes that theory, you have to look at Arsenal's transfer window in the past summer and think, what the hell were you guys doing? And then you have to look at this next transfer window for Arsenal and think to yourself, if you're an Arsenal fan, how do we make sure we don't make the same mistakes? How do we target those kinds of players? And can that eventually take us over the line? Because the flat out reality with Arsenal last season and this season, they have regressed from last year. And sure, it's because they got lucky last year that Saka never went down, Odegaard never went down. They went on a crazy run of form where Arteta really found a good formula. But this season, that formula was found out to an extent. The injuries have disrupted their season. They've been unlucky at the hands of a few refereeing decisions, yes. But there's no argument anymore that the way Arsenal playing, whether it's due to fatigue or whether it's just due to tactical inflexibility or whether it's just due to them getting found out, I don't know what it is, but they are not as good as they were last year. And in a season where the expectation was for them to improve, and in a season where City fell off so much and the expectation was Arsenal were to surpass them, this is a very disappointing season for Arsenal. And it's a very disappointing season for Arteta. And we haven't said that much because since Arteta's come to the club, every year has been an improvement on the next. Whether it was taking over from Emery's team and winning the cup, bringing him some better players, finishing fifth the next season, narrowly missing out on top four, being a title challenge when no one expected it, going to the next season and mounting a serious title challenge where they were unfortunate to lose to a great City team. The next step after that was expected to be take advantage of City's slip up. Maybe even bridge the gap on City themselves. And that just flat out hasn't happened for a multitude of reasons. But really, the rest of the season for Arsenal consists of hoping you can go on a cup run. Obviously, they're in the cup semi-final against Newcastle, which is not going to be easy because Newcastle right now, they might be the form team in the league, 6 wins on the bounce. Another impressive victory against Spurs today. That's going to be tough. Champions League, that's going to be tough as well too. I wouldn't favor them to win the Champions League, but to be fair, stranger things have happened. The FA Cup, they got United. I'd expect them to beat them. So it's going to be cup runs this year. But after that, I really think it's a season of reflection and almost thinking to yourselves, okay, how do we make sure that next season we don't commit the same mistakes that we did last year? And in my opinion, that requires being extremely aggressive in the summer window. And it requires Arteta, I think, to evolve tactically one more time, which I have to give him credit for. Every year, I think bar this season, I think he's been able to tactically evolve. He's going to have to do that this next season because this way Arsenal are approaching football games and the way they're playing them out, the injuries are unfortunate, decisions are unfortunate. I think even without both of them, they would not be winning the league this year. That's the way I view it. On the other hand, with Brighton, these guys are a top team. They're a very, very top team. And I know it's been a bit of a stop-start season for Brighton. They started the season incredibly well. And I think the last month or so, the train has kind of halted to a stop. But games like today, and to be fair, against the Big Six, the traditional Big Six, they've been very good. They beat United, they beat City, they lost to Liverpool, I believe. They've had some good results here and there. But they're a team of very, very talented players, whether it's João Pedro, who I think could be on the move this summer. I think any team that's looking for a top center forward, look, obviously dealing with Brighton is never easy, and there's no guarantee that they sell him. Top player, top player. Baleba, yeah. I know he had that one shot towards the end of the first half. Wayward. I went out for a throw-in, I think. But that's a dominant midfield performance. And I was on Sky Sports this morning saying my prediction for Brighton is within 3 years, they're selling another player for 80 million plus. That very well could be Baleba. And it could very well be over 100 million pounds. Because big credit to Moises Caicedo, who I think is a top-level midfielder. I think this year, arguably, he's been the best midfielder in the league, or at least one of them. I think Baleba arguably has more to his game. That's not a slight on Caicedo. But when you look at their profile physically, technically, I think Baleba has really, he has some traits in his game that if molded correctly under the right manager and put in the right team, we could be looking at one of the most unstoppable all-action midfielders in world football. I'm not trying to over-exaggerate here, but the tools at his disposal, this kid could be serious. This is the kind of player I look at in midfield and think, wow, the right coach gets a hold of you and you might go to the moon. Because to be that strong, that tall, that dominant in your duels, that great at carrying the ball and weaving in between players, that commanding the tackle, wow, that's a serious player. And it's Testament to Brighton's excellent recruitment record, to be fair. Every year, they find these diamonds in the rough. Every single year. But I think they deserve massive credit because I think today, they were just as good as Arsenal, and at times, even better. And I think, look, like I said, the goal is dubious. I can't take that away from Arsenal fans. But on the merit of purely performance, Brighton were deserving to get a draw out of this game. They did. It's a shame that it came in such a way, but their performance merited a draw. On the subject of some other games, very quickly, Chelsea. Hey, you guys were right. My fault. My fault, Chelsea fans. You guys were right. I thought you guys could do something. Not saying you guys were ever going to win the league. I never thought that. But I thought you guys could push Liverpool a bit. My fault. Clearly, it's too early for you guys. You all told us, fair enough, but 4 games on the trot. No wins. And yeah, I'll be real. The immaturity in the squad, or the inexperience rather, is starting to show. Enzo Maresca, the lack of top level experience as a manager in these kinds of moments is starting to show. And yeah, man, I just look at some of those players, to be fair, right? I think there's too many passengers. And I think, honestly, right, Chelsea are in my opinion, will make the top 4. I think they will. I think they have a lot of quality. But I look at some of the transfers that they made this summer in the form of Pedro Neto, in the form of Joao Felix. Obviously, Jadon Sancho had an incredible assist today, and I think he's been their best summer signing. But in the form of Joao Felix and Pedro Neto, who they committed around, £100 million to combined? I'll be real. I think Joao Felix has kind of been left in the dark since the Southampton game, right? I don't really know what's happened with that. And Pedro Neto, I'm a big fan of Pedro Neto. I've always been a big fan of him. But if I'm being objective here, he's kind of been a little disappointing. I don't think he's really lived up to the price tag. And that's money you spend on a marquee player. I don't think Pedro Neto has put in marquee performances. And Cole Palmer has really been dependent on, in terms of goals. Nico Jackson's form has kind of dried up. His goals, his form in front of goal has really dried up. Chelsea have always been defensively leaky this season. Yeah, man. And it's a shame because they kind of went through the toughest part of the first half of the season in a really strong position. And you looked at Chelsea's fixtures, like the next 10, 15 games. You actually thought to yourself, on paper, those are all kinds of games that Chelsea should be going into as favorites. And look at the games they've dropped points in. Everton, Crystal Palace, Fulham. They're games that you would have expected Chelsea to comfortably win. The fact that they haven't tells you and kind of reaffirms what Chelsea fans have been saying. It's a year too early. And I hear it. I keep saying for Chelsea, it's not a big disappointment. For Arsenal, it's different because Arsenal are at a different point in their development as a team under Arteta than Chelsea are under Maresca. Facts. But yeah, I think it's a disappointment because it looked like an opportunity was there. But what can you do, man? They're not ready. They're not ready. Top 4, it should be good. Now, I say that should because there has been a team that have entered the equation here. Newcastle United. Wow. They're the form team in the league. 6 wins on the trot. And the form and the manner in which they're winning their games is just frightening at the moment. Give credit to Eddie Howe because at one point, I think he looked like a potential favorite for the chop in terms of Newcastle. For all the money that they spent in the last few years, I understand the last window wasn't great due to PSR rules and stuff like that. But it almost felt like Newcastle had kind of hit a ceiling with Eddie Howe. But give him massive credit and give the players massive credit because over the last 6 games, this looks like the Newcastle team that when Eddie Howe came in were in the dumps, but he took them up. Like he brought them to mid-table and next season made Champions League football. Alexander Isak is the best striker in the league on current form. Fact. The guy has everything in his game. The general play, the close control dribbling, the intelligence, the movement, the finishing, the size. Isak is a problem. Anthony Gordon, with Thomas Tuchel watching today. He's a problem. The fullback pairing of Livramento and Lewis Hall, molded by Chelsea, developed by Chelsea, but now thriving for Newcastle. How many fullback pairings in the league can you say are as good as Livramento and Lewis Hall? I don't think there is one. Hot take. I don't think there's a single team in the league. I'm really trying to think here, and I can't think of one. I think they have the best fullback pairing in the league. Livramento and Lewis Hall is serious, and they're young. Like, wow. Obviously, Chelsea, they produce brilliant players from their academy, but the fact they let both those go, and both of them ended up at Newcastle, wow. If they can keep those 2 together, it's going to be very difficult because they're going to be making England teams and they're going to have the big boys sniffing around them. But if they can keep those two together for the next 10 years, wow. That's crazy business right there. And then that midfield, Tonali, who since he's come back from his suspension, it started off a little shaky maybe, but the last few weeks looks every bit as good as he did at Milan. Bruno Guimaraes, who today played an absolute blinder against Spurs, and Joelinton, who is just the ultimate bodyguard in midfield. Honestly, he's an absolute brute. He must be the worst player to play against in midfield because no one treads the line of the dark arts and just flat out nastiness like Joelinton. Maybe Bruno Guimaraes, maybe his own teammate does. But that midfield right there, that's a problem for any midfield in the league because physically, intensity-wise, they'll run you into the ground. They'll bully you into the ground, and they can play. So give credit to Newcastle, because out of the abyss, out of nowhere, they have just reemerged as a top 4 threat. December 23rd, that's a few weeks ago, they were 11 points behind Chelsea. January 4th, they're 1 point behind Chelsea. And you look at the trajectory of both sides. It's a long season, but wow, I'd be nervous. Man City, that's 2 wins on the trot for them too. And I think everyone knew City eventually, they're going to find some form. I think a lot of people expected it after the January transfer window when they brought some players in. And granted, if you watch the City games, it's still not vintage City. There's still holes in this team. But 2 things. Haaland has his touch in front of goal again. And Savinho. Maybe that 1 goal against Leicester was what he needed to kind of get his season back on track. Because today, that kid's a problem. That assist for Haaland's second. I think it was Haaland's second. No, was it Haaland's first? The header. Yeah, it's Haaland's first, excuse me. Where he rounds Soufal like he's barely even there. Tremendous pace, show of pace. Goes on the outside of him and puts in a terrific pass to Erling Haaland, who I was really impressed with Haaland for this goal, right? For me, this is top center forward play. Because to link up that deep is not something I always see from Erling Haaland. Typically, he starts very, very high up, but he showed deep, combined, and then made an incredible run all the way up the half of the pitch. Met Savinho's header across to perfection. It's just a tremendously worked goal. And City today in front of goal were purring. They looked like vintage City in front of goal. Now, in terms of defensively, in terms of defending in midfield, there are still problems. And I think it's going to be something that they definitely target in the window. They're already being linked to Marmoush. They're being linked with Kuzmanov, who plays in Ligue 1. They're being linked with players. Bruno Guimaraes still continues to have his name rumored. Ederson. They're going to need to do business this January. But if you can get Foden back on track in terms of goals, he grabbed one today. If you can get Haaland back on track in front of goals, if you can get Savinho, all of a sudden he feels a bit more confident. City are going to make a real meal of this top 4. Honestly, City, Chelsea, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest. That's arguably the most interesting, entertaining aspect of this Premier League season. The top 4 race. Because the league title, that's over. Relegation, I'm pretty confident that 2 teams are going to go down. I think the third one is up for debate. Top 4 race. Bournemouth win again today. Fulham, they play this weekend. Wow. We got a real top 4 race on our hands. I think this is going to be arguably the most entertaining top 4 race that we get in years. Because typically, it usually comes down to who's the least worst of the top 4. This year, there's a lot of teams that are really gunning for it. I think it makes the league more interesting. But unfortunately, on either other side of the league, I think we're getting closer and closer to having a pretty early champion and a pretty early relegated 3. That's just my opinion. Still a lot of football to be played, but let's see how it goes. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe. I'll be back with a big one tomorrow. Liverpool versus Man United. And I'll see you next time. Peace.